Hi folks, Papa Droid for Papa Droid Reviews here, and this is the Realme Q or the Realme 5 Pro, depending on which country you're buying this device in. And I'm using the front camera for this review. Of course, I'm gonna do the all-known 360 for you. During daylight, you see there is a slight overexposure when the light is not coming from the right angle. When it comes from the right angle, it's sharp, it's colorful, and it looks pretty good, to be honest. Keep in mind, it's a €150 phone, and for that price, I think this thing is really great. Let's switch to the rear camera, see what that can do, and of course I'll show the 4 different cameras to you during this review. Let's dig in. I hope you enjoy it. So this being a camera review, let's start with the cameras first. There's a 48 megapixel main sensor, and it's supported by an 8 megapixel wide angle sensor, a 2 megapixel depth sensor, and a 2 megapixel macro camera, dedicated macro camera on a €150 phone. It's fantastic. The phone looks great, as you can tell, and on the front there's also the 16 megapixel wide selfie cam with HDR and panorama shot and night shot. So let's start with the wide angle shots first. I'm using the wide angle lens on the Realme 5 Pro or the Realme Q at this moment, and to be honest, it doesn't look shabby at all. This is the main camera lens, the 48 megapixel camera, and of course you see the dynamic range improving a lot when you switch from the wide angle lens to the regular lens, and the quality is much better overall. Here's the 5x zoom, and there is little to no stabilization using that, as you probably can tell, so the footage might be a little more shaky, but on the other hand, you got 5x zoom on a €150 device, which is, in my opinion, not bad at all. And again, this scene is shot with the 48 megapixel main sensor. It's shot in low light sunset, just to let you see that the dynamic range is absolutely great on this phone, and also switching between lenses is pretty decent, as you can tell. Now the dynamic range is something else. It's spot on, and also the portrait mode was really good. What I noticed is that when you have the chroma boost on, is sometimes the colors, the saturation is way too much, and that's easy to be helped by switching off the chroma boost. As you can tell, the close-up shots and the macro shots are stunning. There's a little twist on those, but I'll tell you more about that later. Indoor shots on daylight, portrait shots in daylight are all looking fantastic, as you can tell. Now let's see what this camera can do when the lights turn low. Hi guys, Papa Droid for Papa Droid Reviews, and I'm coming from you from the Realme Q or the Realme 5 Pro, depending on which country you're in. It's marketed under a different name, it's the same phone. And I'm using the front camera. It's dark and it's just a street light illuminating me. And to be honest, I must say, so far it looks really good. Make it 360 for you. Again, it's the front camera. It's dark outside, as you can tell. And I think it beats the Redmi Note 8 by 1,000 miles. So this is the rear camera. Of course, I'm going to switch to the front camera. I'm going to switch to the rear camera now. And let's see how that turns out. Alright, video recording in the dark. 1080p on the Realme Q or the Realme 5 Pro, depending on the country you're in again. And to be honest, it's completely dark outside. And look at that. Look at those details. I can even zoom in. Look at that, people. Look at that. The 5 times is a bit too much for the darkness, I think. But then again, it does the job quite well, to say the least. Now let's look at some still pictures and then see the difference between normal mode and night mode. As you can tell, night mode clears things up, but also night sight sometimes messes up the colors, and then you get a clearer shot, but it's almost psychedelic. I'll show you some examples, like this flat building. It started to look like something in a comic book on a night sight, and some shots are okay, but this is a shot of the Huawei Mate, and by comparison you can tell the pictures are just better. Like said before, the Realme Q comes with 4 cameras. There's a telelens, a wide-angle lens, the regular 48 megapixel sensor, and there's a dedicated macro sensor. And the latter, that dedicated macro sensor, is something I want to talk about, because we found the macro sensor in the Redmi Note 8 to be anything but a gimmick. In fact, it worked really well, and you could make great macro shots with it. So, and that's where my problem with the Realme Q starts. That's the only con I could find so far, except for maybe a slight oversaturation when you're using the main 48 megapixel sensor. Turning off chroma boost helps a lot and gets the colors a tad more natural. But that macro lens, let's talk about that for a moment. You see, when I use a macro lens, I think I can make great macro shots, right? And you can make great macro shots with the Realme Q. The only thing is, you don't need to use the macro lens for it. In fact, you better stay off the macro lens to make a great macro shot. I'm gonna show you some samples and explain why I think the macro lens is somewhat of a gimmick. Let's go. First, let me show you some macro shots on the Realme Q. They're not really macro, as you can tell. They're not really super imposing, and they're blurry. They're not looking good. Now, this is the macro shot I did with the macro lens. I use the main lens now, and I put the main lens on 2 times zoom. Look what happens. You can get a closer shot, a clearer shot, and a much more beautiful shot. Again, this is the macro lens. This is the regular lens. 2 times zoom. Same thing here. You can tell it's just better. But all in all, the sensor has really powerful options, as you can tell, and no matter what the light situations are or what situation you use or choose, stay with the main sensor. It's better. Now let's go to the slow motion. Slow motion is really great on this phone. You got the 120 frames per second slow motion. That does its job quite well, as you can tell. Everything looks buttery smooth, and the colors stay crisp, and it just works fine. Now, this clip is taking a little longer than I expected. It's called slow motion for a reason, I suppose. This is the 240 frames per second. As you can tell, it really looks great, and you can capture really interesting scenes in slow motion. Granted, this is not the most interesting scene, but it's just for an example, so you can have an idea of what it can do. And last but not least, we have the 960 frame per second slow motion, and you can tell that it's really, really slow. Time lapse is also available, and as you can tell, that works great. And all in all, this is a real great phone. Let's go to the performance real quick. It shows up quite well on the Antutu score, about 212,000 points there. The 3D fix was within seconds and 5 meters distance. It looks gorgeous, and it runs on ColorOS 6. Not my favorite OS, to be honest, but all in all, if you think the price of this phone and what it can do, you can't go wrong. I love the Realme Q. Thanks for watching. See you all next time.